Hello friends, welcome to Awdhesh Academy. Friends, today we are going to start a new chapter, that is ethics in private and public relationships. Friends, we cannot apply the same moral standards in the public affair what we apply in the private domain. So there are different moral standards for the public and for the private domain. So this is a very important chapter of ethics paper, and we are going to learn about this particular topic. And today in the first lesson we are going to learn about public and private ethics. So let us first recollect the concept of ethics. We know that ethics, or it is also sometimes called moral philosophy, is basically a branch of philosophy that involves systematizing, defending and recommending the concepts of right and wrong behavior. So in ethics, what we do is that we decide what is right and what is wrong in a particular situation, and we present that in a very systematic manner, and then whatever we consider is right or wrong, we defend that, and then we recommend as what we should do in a given situation. So that is in short the introduction of ethics or the moral philosophy. However, our moral values keep on changing depending upon the situation. One of the very interesting thing is that people often follow different standard of moralities in their public life and in their private life. Sometimes, people may be very corrupt in the public life, but they may be very honest with their family members. So they may be faithful to their spouse, they may be taking care of their children, but as far as the job is concerned, they may be corrupt. On the other hand, there are people who are very honest in the public life, but they are not moral as far as the personal domain is concerned. They follow immoral practices in the private life, for example, extramarital affair or other immoral practices. So a person who is having an integrity will be ethical or moral in both public as well as in the private life. So it is very important for us to have a consistency of ethics in public as well as private life. Our ethics of public life have to be grounded in ethics in private life. That means unless we follow the same ethical values in our private life, we cannot become a very successful public servant, and we cannot follow the moral standard in the public life. If there is an inconsistency in ethics between what we do in the public life and what we do in the private life, that can have a very disastrous consequences. Let me give you an example. There was a great Hindu philosopher and social reformer, and his name was Keshav Chandra Sen. He was very much opposed to the child marriage, and he was leading a movement against that. But what happened that he married his own underage daughter to Maharaja of Kuch, Bihar. So he was against the child marriage in public, but in private life, he got married his own daughter to a Maharaja. As a result, what happens that he lost trust of his followers, and his followers abandoned him because such an action exposed his campaign against the child marriage as hollow. And so we have to see that we should be consistent in our public and private life. So let us first talk about the private relationships. The private relationships involve the relationship between individual and the close family members or friends. For example, our parents, our spouse, our children, our uncle and all that. So that is a family member, and then the friends which we make, they are basically in the domain of our private relationships. In this case, what happens that members know each other for long and they understand each other at the deepest level. This circle is a small circle. We have a very long-term commitment, and so we know each other very well. So ethics in the private relationship provides intimacy, trust, love and compassion. So it basically is for a different purpose, because that will be providing you intimacy, and then we will trust each other when we are in the close private relationship. We'll love each other and we'll have compassion for each other. Now, if there is any problems between the people within the private relationship, they will try to sort out the problems by mutual agreement and negotiations. Let us now understand the nature of the public relationships. Now, what happens that this private relationship is limited only to few people. It cannot be applied on a very large domain. So when the size of the members of any group become very large, we have to follow a very different standard of morality in the public domain. So the public relationship basically involve those type of relationship which is between individual in the public sphere. For example, when you are a civil servant, you are dealing with large number of people whom you don't know personally. In the same way, when we are working in the corporate, we are responsible to a large number of clients and vendors and the people who are our bosses or the people who are working with us. So when we are ethical in our public dealing and with our public relationships, then what happens? We get respect from the people, we get attention of them, we also enjoy power and authority because people respect us, and we also get materialistic benefit. For example, we get salary, we get promotions and all those things. So one very important thing is that a civil servant is basically a public servant, and he must keep the public interest in mind when he is performing his duties, because that is what the civil services are for. We are public servant and we have to work for the welfare of the public. We shall define what is public interest later in this particular chapter. So let us understand what is the meaning of ethics in the private and public relationships. Now, private relationships are for a small group of people. They often lead to self-interest, where the person is interested in benefiting the self and the people related to him. So in private relationships, we are limiting our relationship with a limited number of people, and we try to help each other. We try to fulfill our self-interest in the private relationships. Ethics in private relationships help in humanizing public relations and plays an important role in forming the base for the moral values of the person. Now, this small private relationship domain is like a mini society where we practice all our skills, all our moralities, we learn how to deal with the people, and that is basically something like a training which provides us a foundation and which help us when we are going to deal with the public at large. So that is why if you want to be a good public servant, you should also be a good human being who can manage his private relationships also very well. A civil servant is a public servant and he must always keep the public interest in mind, and a good public servant must balance self-interest and the public interest. So as a civil servant, we must focus on the public interest, try to do the things which are in the public interest rather than in the self-interest. Both the things are interconnected with each other. We have to take care of our private relationship and also our public relationship. So we have to balance our self-interest as well as the public interest. And so a good civil servant balances both, that is self-interest and public interest. So I hope you got the basic idea about the ethics in the private and public relationships. We will know more about these relationships and the ethics thereof in the subsequent lessons. Friends, today we are going to learn about ethics in private relationships. We have learned earlier that the private relationships means the family and the friends. So this is a limited circle. There are few people in that. So what sort of ethics we follow there? What are the benefits? What are the principles? All those things we are going to learn today. So let's understand the type of relationships which we have in the private domain. We have very intimate and informal relationships in our private world. That includes family, friends. There are no rules there. We just follow the methods which we mutually agreed upon. We don't follow any set pattern. Every family has its own set of rules when it is dealing with private matters. In the personal domain, we are like sovereign rulers in the sense that we can choose whatever we want to do and whichever way we want to live in our private space. We make our own rules and laws, and we can also amend them. And that is why you can find that every family is having a unique method of living, unique set of rules and laws which are applicable within the family. In the same way with friends also, we have a very informal methods of dealing. Here everyone tries to help each other due to their mutual feeling of love and compassion. Because we are emotionally connected with each other, so we don't look for our personal benefit. We rather try to help each other so that both of us grow and every member in the family grows. We practice love and compassion in personal relations. We may forgive when someone commits a mistake. So we are not required to punish somebody. It is our choice. We can persuade the person, we can convince the person, and sometimes what happens is that we even punish ourselves for the mistake of our loved ones. It is very common that when the child commits a grave mistake, the mother stop eating food, and that basically makes the child mend his ways. Same thing happens on the other side also. If the parents has been very harsh on the children can also show their resentment in a different way, and then the parents also understand that they have committed a mistake, and then they try to find out some midway and reconcile their differences. Now, what are the type of ethical values we follow in the private relationships? In the private domain, we try to cultivate the individual virtues. For example, courage, temperance, that means controlling our desires, appetite, prudence, that means we should try to have wisdom, try to see which is the best course of action in each situation, and justice. So, this is the very important thing, that we want virtuous people around us, and so we follow the virtue as far as our private people are concerned. Then we also follow universal human values. We also follow the religious values which are prevalent in our family, which are followed by our family members. We also follow the social norms, and we also observe the law. So these are the type of ethical values which we follow in the private relationships. Now there are certain attributes which are there in the private relationships. We should know about them. First, that these private relationships can be inherited or chosen. For example, our parents, we have not chosen. We are born to our parents. Our brothers and sisters are also related to us. They are not by choice. So that we have inherited. At the same time, we also choose certain people when we make them friend and bring them into our private domain. We also love people based on our choice. We get married to them, and then we create a family, we start a family. So we can inherit the private relationship or we can choose. It is relatively permanent. Relationships last almost for the life. It's more tolerant for imperfections. If we commit some mistakes, we can be forgiven. We know the weaknesses of each person. Still, we like each other. So it's more tolerant for the imperfection. There is a mutual interest, and it's a long-term interest. When we help someone, we get help also from that person in the long run. There are well-defined roles in the private relationships. So the father plays his role, mother plays the role, child plays the role, brother, sister plays the role, friends also play their roles. So there are well-defined roles as far as the private relationships are concerned. We also expect loyalty, love, affection from one another in our private relationships. Then we also follow the values of faithfulness and loyalty in our private relationships. So these are basically the attributes of private relationships. Another very important thing we should understand as far as the private relationships are concerned, that private relationship is based on self-interest, and also sometimes it goes to the extent of selfishness. So let's understand the difference between self-interest and selfishness. Now, self-interest is a concern for one's own well-being. As we say that God help those who help themselves, and therefore it is important that we help ourselves. So there is nothing bad in that. We should all take care of ourselves, and that is basically called self-interest. Now, the self-interest is quite essential for our happiness because we know what makes us happy, and we must take care of ourselves. We should not be dependent upon other people to take care of ourselves. And to that extent, if everybody takes care of themselves, it provides independence and it also provides more happiness to the people. So self-interest is basically very essential for our happiness and well-being because it enables a person to take care of the self and also the family. Self-interest also includes the family because when we help our family member, they help us, and to that extent, we help each other. Self-interest includes caring for each other for mutual benefit. So, like when the children are young, parents take care of them. But when the children grow up, parents become old, then the children take care of the parents. So this way we take care of each other, and that also falls in the domain of self-interest, because ultimately what we are doing is going to benefit us in return. On the other side, the selfishness is a negative word. It is having a negative connotation. It basically means being concerned excessively or exclusively with oneself. When we are only concerned about ourselves, we are not concerned about our family members and our friends, we only try to exploit them, we only try to use them for our own interest, that basically becomes selfishness, and that is not a good thing. A selfish person seeks own advantage, pleasure or well-being without regards of other. And so a selfish person is not liked by the society, he is not liked by the family members, he is not liked by the friends. And so selfishness is not something which is good. So we should understand that self-interest is desirable, but selfishness is undesirable. So finally, let us understand what is the basic principle governing the private ethics. Private relationships may be inherited and they are more durable, and so we have a long-term investment and long-term implication of doing good or bad things in our private domain. When we are working in a public, then our relationships are very short-term. We can be transferred, we can choose another job, but as far as the private relationships are concerned, they are very long-term and durable. We choose our friends and we can unfriend them if relationship gets sore or bad. But as far as our family members are concerned, we don't choose them and we can't leave them also at our choice. And in our private domain, in our private zone, we expect our loved ones to be virtuous, caring, honest, and truthful to us. We want good qualities, at least within our private domain. We can't live with a person who is unfaithful to us. We can't live with a person who is a liar or a cheater. We want all good qualities to be there with the people within our private zone. So even the thieves, even the criminals, they try to be honest when it comes to their private domain or in the private relationships. We practice love, compassion, forgiveness for mutual benefit here. In the private domain, we can follow the golden rule, which is do unto others as you would have them do to you. That means we always try to do the things in a way what we expect other person to do to us. And so this famous golden rule can be very much applied in the private domain. Karl Marx, who has given the basic principle of socialism in the following words: from each according to his ability, to each according to its need. Now this is also a principle which can be applied in the private domain. Because in the private domain, it's not a plain give and take. It's not a business transaction. So a mother does what she is best at, a father does what he is best at, children do what they are best at. But everybody gets the same benefit. So when it comes to doing, we do what is our ability, but when it comes to taking, then it is given depending upon your needs. So a child may not be contributing much as far as earning is concerned and may not be contributing much to the family, but he gets priority because his needs are more. And so this principle can also be applied very much in the private ethics. Now, as far as following the ethics in private life is concerned, we should understand that we follow the ethical principles which suits us in the given situation. We often follow different type of ethics in our private and public life, because people are not like philosophers who are basically committed to uphold or defend a particular ethical approach or theory. Particularly when it comes of application of the different ethics, we often follow different set of ethics in our private life and in our personal life. So let's understand that in our private life, we follow the principles and norms that are appropriate in a situation and that justify their action, and they can basically be different from what we follow in the public life. For example, a same person can be a utilitarian in business. That means he will try to make people as much happy as possible. But when the same person is working in a profession, within the profession, whatever rules are there, he will try to follow all those rules. So he will be acting as a deontologist. When the same person is dealing with the community as a social member, he may follow virtue ethics. But when it comes to his own family members, he may be following relationship ethics for his children, for his parents, and for his siblings. So friends, the same person in different areas of work may follow different types of ethics. What happens if we are not ethical in our private relationships? The consequences are different. We may not be sent to prison. We may not have fine and penalty imposed by the government, but still there are grave consequences if we are not ethical in our private life. If we don't follow the ethical principle in our private life, we lose love, compassion, trust, and faith of the people whom we love. So the people who are around us, if we cheat them, if we are not ethical with them, then the love is broken, love is gone, trust is broken, and then we lose all the intimacy. And therefore, it is much more important for us to be ethical in the private relationships, because it is far more painful to us than the punishment which is meted out by the state for breaking the law. Because the punishment by the state is almost impersonal, but the punishment by our loved one is very, very painful. That reminds me of a famous quote of Friedrich Nietzsche when he said, "I am not upset that you lied to me. I am upset that from now on I can't believe you." So within the private relationships, if your lie is caught, then you lose the trust forever, because you can never trust a person who is lying to you. And that's a tremendous pain and a loss for a person in the private domain. So friends, today we have learned about the ethics in the private life and the private relationships. We will continue and we'll learn more about other lessons of this particular chapter in the subsequent lesson. Thank you very much. Friends, we know that the public servants must have highest level of ethics and morality. If our public servants do not possess the ethical standards, then the country cannot progress. Then the common people cannot follow the ethical standards, because they look upon the public servants as a role model. And so today we are going to learn about the roles of public servant and what are the ethical expectations of the public servant and what are the challenges before the public servants in being ethical. So let's start first by understanding who a public servant is. A public servant is a person who is employed in government, department or agency. So anybody who is employed in the central government or in the state government or in the organizations which are substantially funded by the central or state government or the public sector undertaking, all these people are the public servants. According to section 21 of the Indian Penal Code, a public servant includes commissioned officers of armed forces, judges, civil servants, elected representatives of the parliament, state legislatures or municipalities, and the employees of public sector undertaking and government universities. So practically all people who are working under the central state government, either directly or indirectly, are the public servants. Now let's understand about the ethics of public servants. Now just because you become a public servant, it does not mean that you do not have other roles to play. For example, even if you are a district magistrate of a district or SP or a commissioner of income tax, you still continue to be a family man. You are son of somebody, you are daughter of somebody, then you are a spouse of someone, then you have children, and therefore we have to play a multiple role in the society. And each role requires different type of values and standard of behavior. Now, some of these duties and responsibilities are informal while others are formal. So, for example, in your official capacity as a district collector, SP or commissioner, your duties are formal in nature. While in your home, you can devise your own mechanism and live informally. Now, in our private domain, the moral standards are different, and in the public domain, our moral standards have to be different because we have to be very formal there. We cannot apply the same practices at both the places. There is a very famous teaching or quote by Max Weber who said, "It is not wise to apply to public administration the sort of moral and ethical norms we apply to matter of personal conscience. It is important to realize that the state bureaucracy might possess its own independent bureaucratic morality." Now let's understand what does it mean. In our personal domain, we can forgive a person who has done something wrong because it is our prerogative. But once you are working in a public office, you have to follow the law, you have to produce the result. You are not a sovereign there, you are not an independent person there. You have to produce a result and follow the law of the land. So a police department, for example, will have a different moral values. For example, you cannot have the values of non-violence and compassion and love in the army or the police department. You have to deal with the criminals, you have to deal with the enemies, and therefore you have to follow a different moral standards to produce result, to curb crime, to defeat your enemies. And so we should understand that we have different moral standards at home as well as at our professional place. Now, Dwight Waldo, he is an American political scientist and one of the most defining figures of the modern public administration. He defines 12 areas of ethical claim on the public official. So once we occupy the place in the government, become a public official, there are 12 claims on us. And let's understand these 12 claims. These are Constitution. We have to be loyal to the Constitution. We are appointed by the Constitution. We have to implement the law. We have to be a nationalist. We have to think about the nation. We have to think about our country or people. That is public interest also we have to look into. Then we have to also see that India is a democracy, and therefore we have to respect the popular opinion, the view of the people. At the same time, every organization has certain bureaucratic norms, certain procedures, certain precedents, certain culture, certain traditions. Those things also we have to follow. Then we should be professional in our approach, in the sense that we should be able to produce the result. For example, a police officer must do everything to see that the crime reduces and the criminals are brought to book. Tax officer has to collect intelligence and catch the tax evader, realize the taxes which are due to the government. So that professional responsibility is there. Then we also have family and friends. They also cannot be neglected. We have to take care of them. We have a responsibility toward them. Then self. We have to take care of ourselves also. Then public interest and general welfare. So the general welfare also has to be looked into, and we have to see that whatever we do is in the public interest. Then humanity, and then religion or God. So these are different type of ethical claims which a public official has to carry on, and so this is something which you have to keep in mind, and these things can be carried out in one go, but at the same time sometimes it may so happen that there may be conflict between them. So the greatest challenge before the public official is to balance all the 12 claims on him or her, because all claims are important, and the ethical obligations become complex when there is a conflict between the different principles or different claims. For example, there can be conflict between bureaucratic norms, law, professional values, family commitment. For example, if you are a police officer and you fight with a criminal to discharge your duty, there is always a threat on your personal life and also on the members of your family. So you have to pay a price on that. If you refuse to follow the direction of the politicians, maybe you can get transferred, and that's going to affect your family. So there are conflicts between all these different stakeholders. There can be a conflict between professional judgment and public interest. Sometimes you feel that something is to be done which is according to the law, and sometimes the public interest may be different. For example, let us say if the public is demonstrating against an unjust law. Now, in that case, maybe if the law is taken away from the law books, it is good for the public. But you have to implement the law, or you have to actually quell that crowd. You have to often fire against those people. And so the professional judgment and the public interest may sometimes be different. There can be conflict between your own professional and personal interest. So when you dedicate too much of time on your professional responsibilities, your family suffers. And when you take care of your family and sacrifice your professional duties, then the public suffers. So there can be conflict between them. So some examples here are, for example, police encounter. Now, sometime in order to reduce the crime in your district, you have to go for police encounter. Sometime it may be illegal or not strictly according to the law. Transfer posting is another issue. If you don't heed to the direction of your superior officers or the senior politicians, you may be transferred and your family may suffer. And sometimes there can be a conflict of interest because your family member may be involved in some of the things which may be professionally hindering your way. So these are the different type of challenges which a public servant faces. Now, what are the different type of roles which are expected from the public servants who are ethical? They should be having an allegiance to the Constitution. Constitution is like a Quran or Bible or Gita for the public servants, and they must follow that very strictly. They should uphold the rule of law. They should maintain objectivity and transparency in their functioning. They should be very objective in whatever they do. That means not based on your biases and prejudices. And then whatever decision they take, they should write the reasons for that. They should be open for scrutiny. If somebody wants information, they should provide that information. That is basically the meaning of transparency. They should maintain absolute integrity, no chance of corruption. They should be seen to be very honest. They should ensure effective and efficient use of public funds. So the public funds are coming from the public, and we must try to see that it is used in the best interest of the public. And then whatever we do, we should perform our duty in the public interest. I shall be talking more about the public interest in the subsequent lessons. We'll explain in detail what is the meaning of public interest. So these are the expected roles of an ethical public servant. So friends, today we have learned about the ethical challenges before the public servants. We'll learn more about them in the subsequent lessons. Thank you very much. Friends, today we are going to learn about the ethics in public relationships, that is PR. So a good government officer also must have a good PR team or good public relationship team, because that is how he interact with the public and not on one-to-one basis. And so what sort of ethics has to be followed in the public relationships, that is the topic for today. So let's first understand what is the meaning of public life. Public life is that vast collection of political, cultural, social, and economic structures, including the workplace, which make up and underpin cohesive societies. So the public life is basically responsible for creating a cohesive society. That means the society where people are connected with each other. And it has political dimension, cultural dimension, social dimension, and the different type of economic dimensions. And this creates a workplace where the public official works, and interact with the public in general. Now, the people engaged in the public life in a leadership position influence the lives of large number of people to varying degree. Now, if you are working in a private company, if you are owning a private company or having your own business, your influence is limited only to your customers and certain other stakeholders. But in the public life, whatever we do has a wide impact on a large number of public. And that is how the public life is different than the corporate life or the private life. Now let's now understand the public relationship. Public relation or PR is a management function that involves monitoring and evaluating public attitudes and maintaining mutual relations and understanding between an organization and its public. Now, this public relationship is not limited only to the government organization. It includes the corporates also. For example, if you are manufacturing any item, you have a large number of customers with whom you have to interact. They should know about you. They should have a mechanism to approach you, express their grievances and preferences, and you should be able to sort it out. And so basically that is between the organization, the people working in the organization, and the people who are dealing with that organization or the common public, and the type of interaction which is made between them is what is called public relationships. Now, public basically includes the shareholders, the government, the consumers, the employees, and the media. And public relationship is an act of getting along with people we constantly come in touch with. So like a police officer is responsible to the public of his jurisdiction. In the same way, a corporate who is manufacturing a particular consumer product is responsible to all the customers. So by public relationship, we come in touch with them and we have a communication link with each other. Now, public relationship is spread over a much larger number of people, most of whom we don't know personally. And that is where the public relations and the private relations vary. In the private relationships, we know each other very well, while in the public relations, we don't know each other well. As a matter of fact, the public does not know you. The public know only your institution. For example, they know that there is a DM, there is a judge, there is an SP, and they don't know you as a person. And therefore, when you are representing an institution, you have to behave in a very dignified manner and carry on the responsibility of that particular institution when you are dealing with the public. Let us now understand the public relationship functions. The PR officers are appointed by each organization who interact with the people. So these PR officers guarantee internal unity in the company or organization by maintaining a clear communication network between the management and the various personnel. So these PR officers take the feedback from the concerned person within the organization and then give the view of the organization to the public. So they maintain an internal harmony, because if individuals are allowed to speak on every issue, then there can be difference of opinion and the people can be confused. That is one of the reasons why the government officers, because of the conduct rule, they are not allowed to interact with the public and express their opinion. Because if there are 500 district magistrates and they each start expressing their views openly, then the public will be confused when there is a conflict of the opinion. So the PR officer or public relationship officer is like one-point contact. The PR improves the channel of communication within an organization and to establish new ways of setting up a two-way flow of information and understanding. So when the public gives some sort of feedback or public demands something, the PR officer basically connect them with the organization. They get the information, they communicate to the public, and they take the public feedback and communicate to the organization. And that is how they maintain the two-way flow of information. When we are talking about public relationship, it basically means that the people who are outside our private domain, that is family and friends. And we start learning about these public relations at a very early age. We learn to develop public relationship from very early childhood as we have to deal with a large number of people as soon as we step out of our home. So we learn to deal with the people whom we don't know personally as soon as we start interacting with the outside world. So we deal with the different people, for example, the schoolmates, the teachers, the neighbors, the colleagues, and the different stakeholders like supplier, consumers. These are all the examples of public dealing, and with them we have to learn to develop the proper public relationship. Now let's understand how we maintain ethics in public relationships. First of all, we should develop ethical code of conduct. So that has to be followed as to what is to be done and what is not to be done. For example, we should not take any favor from our vendors and our different stakeholders. And you know that in the government and in every profession there is a proper code of conduct. All the employees must follow the code of ethics and the code of conduct which is prescribed by the employer. And anybody who does not follow that, action can be taken against them. And if you violate these codes, there can be penalties which can be imposed upon you. So there are two things, code of ethics and code of conduct. So let's know about the code of ethics first. A code of ethics is broad, giving employees or members a general idea of what type of behaviors or decisions are acceptable and encouraged at a business or organization. So code of ethics are basically the broad guidelines. For example, in the government, you are supposed to be honest, impartial, politically neutral, objective. All those things are basically the examples of code of ethics which we must follow. These code of ethics guide the employees to perform their functions in an ethical manner. Usually these are the guidelines and there is no specific penalties which are prescribed if you don't follow the code of ethics. But if that is noticed by the organization, then they can take suitable action against you. But no specific provisions are there for imposing penalty. These are guidance. As far as the specific provisions are concerned, they are covered under the code of conduct. A code of conduct is more focused and it defines how employees or members should act in a specific situation. So it covers all the situations like conflict of interest, taking gift, or informing the employees about your different type of interactions. So all those things are covered under code of conduct. These things we will be dealing much in detail in the subsequent lessons. Specific activities are prohibited and penalties also prescribed for violating them. For example, if you are taking gift from a person with whom you are having an official dealing, there can be punishment because these are prohibited. It basically helps the employees to avoid the possibility of the conflict of interest and moral degradation. So if you don't take favor from other people, you are not required to do favor to them. You can strictly follow your duties. So these help us avoid the conflict of interest and be moral in our performance of duty. It also develops confidence in the public regarding integrity, morality, and fair play because it creates a positive perception. Suppose you are a district collector and you are having a party at the place of the contractor. Naturally, the perception will be that you will be favoring that. Maybe you are very objective, maybe you are very strict, but perception will be different. So code of conduct try to curb that perception also. Sometimes what happens that there are some unethical practices which are followed in the public relationships. For example, spreading false and malicious news about opponent. So defame your opponents, then suppress the unfavorable information of self. So provide only half truth, half information. Sometimes the PR companies are used for trolling and defaming the opponent on social media platforms. This is particularly very prominent in the political domain. Then there are paid news to get publicity in newspapers. And sometimes they make false claims about the product and services. And so that way they deceive their consumers. So these are some sort of unethical practices which are followed in the PR domain. It is advisable that we should not follow unethical practices in the PR because it may provide you instant benefit, but it's having a long-term loss and a damaging consequence. Once the lie of the fraudulent PR is detected, the people lose trust And thereafter, even if you are speaking truth, people will not believe you. There is a very famous quote by Abraham Lincoln: you can fool all the people some of the time and some of the people all the time, but you cannot fool all the people all the time. And so remember that good PR is useless unless you also perform well. Public servant must follow ethical public relations to maintain credibility of the self and the institution. And therefore, you should not follow the unethical practices as far as the PR relationship is concerned, because it will spoil not only our reputation but also the reputation of the organization where we are working. So friends, we have learned today about the ethical practices in the PR or the public relations, and I hope that you have understood the concept very well. Thank you very much for watching this lesson. Friends, for any country to develop, it requires honesty and integrity. The public servants and the ministers must be honest. That is one of the most important requirements for any country to develop. However, it is wisely said, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So, as soon as the power is given either to the public servant or to the ministers, they tend to be corrupt. And that is why it is very, very important that we must have some sort of code of conduct, some sort of ethical standard which actually controls the corruption or check the corruption. So this corruption is not only common in India, but all over the world. In even developed countries, this problem is faced. So what happens that a few decades ago, this problem was faced in United Kingdom. And United Kingdom set up a committee, and this committee was called Nolan Committee. Nolan Committee has prescribed certain ethical standards, and that standards were accepted all over the world, and it's very interesting to learn about them before we learn the ethical standards for our own Indian conditions. Now, the official name of the committee, which was headed by Nolan, was called Committee on Standards in Public Life. This was an independent advisory non-departmental public body to the government of United Kingdom. It was established in October 1994 by the Prime Minister John Major. This was in response to the concern of that conduct of some of the politicians which were found to be unethical. The term of reference of the Nolan Committee was as following: to examine current concerns about standards of conduct of all holders of public office, including arrangements relating to financial and commercial activities, and make recommendation as to any changes in the present arrangements which might be required to ensure the highest standard of probity in public life. And the term public life was defined to include ministers, civil servants, and the advisors and the member of parliaments. So the scope of Nolan Committee was very, very wide, and the intention was to cover all the people who are occupying the post in the government, whether elected representative or the permanent executives like the civil servants. Nolan Committee published its first report in 1995, and they have established 7 principles of public life. And these principles are often called Nolan principles. So today we are going to learn about the 7 principles of public life which are valid all over the world in all the government services, which are particularly the democracies, and so it is very much valid for Indian conditions also. The first principle is called selflessness. That means the holders of the public office or the public servant should act solely on the public interest. So when we occupy power in government, then our self-interest should become secondary. We should not act for self-interest. We should act on public interest. That is very, very important. And we should not do anything which will give us any sort of financial gains or other benefits, or for our family members or our friends. So we have to understand that this power is given to us for the public welfare, and that is the only area where we should focus upon. We should not allow that power to be misused by our friends, family members, or even for our own selfish interest. The second principle is integrity. The meaning of integrity is that the public servants should not put themselves into any financial or other obligations to an outside individual or organizations that might seek to influence them in the performance of their official duties. Remember that in this world there is always a quid pro quo. If we take anything from anybody, we have to pay a price for it. Somebody has wisely said there are no free lunches. Whenever a private person obliges to a government officer, whether directly or indirectly, whether by giving bribe or giving gift, or simply organizing a function or trying to make him popular, whatever he does, there is an objective, there is a purpose behind it. And if you want to be a person of integrity, then it is important that you should not take any sort of financial obligation, whether small or big, from any of the private players, because sooner or later you have to compromise with your integrity to repay what he has given to you because you are a public servant. The third important principle is called objectivity. The meaning of the objectivity is that there should be no subjectivity in our decisions. It means we should decide the case on the basis of the facts, documents, evidences, not on the basis of our personal prejudices, personal biases. So this is very, very important for the public servant, that the public servant should conduct themselves objectively and they should take all the decisions based on merit. So whenever they are making appointments or they are giving contracts or recommending any individual for any reward or benefits, they must ensure that it is totally objective and they are not suffering from any bias. The fourth very important point is accountability. See, in the government service, there is a hierarchy. For example, Prime Minister is the most powerful person. Then you have Cabinet Minister, then you have Chief Ministers, then you have bureaucrats, starting from the Secretary to the Principal Secretaries and the Under Secretaries, and so many other type of ranks are there. Now, important point here is that everybody in the government think that they are very powerful because all the people are occupying high chairs. So they feel that they are above the law because ultimately on their orders people implement the law. That is wrong. This committee is recommended that people should be accountable irrespective of the rank, whether you are a Prime Minister, whether you are a Chief Minister, whether you are a Secretary, DM, SP, whatever rank. You should be accountable to the people, and therefore you must open your decision. Whatever decision you have taken, let people examine that decision. Let the government agencies, media, judiciary examine that decision and see whether your decision has been taken in the right way or not. So you have to be held accountable for whatever you are doing. And if you have committed any mistakes, let them point out the mistakes so that you can explain why such mistakes has taken place. And if of course the mistake is bona fide, you will not suffer any punishment, but you will at least learn the lessons. The fifth important point is openness, transparency. See, we take decisions in government, a lot of decisions are taken, but why we are taking the decisions, people are generally not aware. And unless we know why a particular decision is taken, that decision appears to be arbitrary. But once we know the logic of the decision, then people know that yes, certain thoughts has gone into the mind of the person who is taking the decision, and that is why the decision has been taken. So all the decisions which has been taken, the decisions should be transparent, they should give the reasons for taking the decision, and they should restrict the information from the public only when it is absolutely necessary and it is in the national interest. If it is not in the national interest to keep the information secret, confidential, then they should reveal all the information to the public so that the public can see why a particular decision has been taken. And this naturally brings some sort of, a relationship, a confidence and a trust between the public and the government. The sixth important principle is honesty. The public servant should work absolutely honestly. They should reveal whatever interest they have, whatever property they have to the public, so that public know that whether I am interested in a particular company, whether I am interested in a particular place, why I am doing some decisions, so that people can clearly see that I am honest who I am. That means if you are a public servant, then your life should be open to the public. At least the professional life should be open to the public. So that is very important, and as a public servant we should ensure that we do not have a conflict of interest with any person which has to be there, otherwise we have to compromise our honesty. The seventh important principle of Nolan Committee was leadership. A public servant is seen in awe, whether it's a public servant or the politicians. If they are bad, then the country cannot be progressive. So they must provide a leadership. They must promote the right values and principles so that the people are motivated to follow them and do the same. And therefore, the seventh important quality is the leadership. The public servants, the politicians, they must display leadership so that people respect them, imitate them, they are inspired by them, and they do the right thing without any enforcement of law or without any fear of punishment. So friends, today we have learned about the recommendations of the Nolan Committee as to what public servants should do, how they should inspire the people, what sort of behavior is expected from them, and if the public servant follow that, then naturally the public service will improve to a very high degree. Thank you very much for watching the video. Please answer the questions which are there after this video. That will help you build the concept. Thank you very much.